regardless of their race, ethnicity, income, gender, zip code, or immigration status. Dallas's leadership knows this can only happen with a community-driven plan of action to improve residents' quality of life. That means collaborating with residents, businesses, and organizations to develop and implement data-driven policies that promote equity, inclusion, and resilience. It means working hand-in-hand across dividing lines that have historically kept us apart. The Resilient Dallas strategy outlines how we can make Dallas a city of opportunity for everyone. 3 notable goals are to make Dallas a welcoming city to immigrants, leverage partnerships to address behavioral health, and alleviate adverse environmental conditions by promoting sustainability. As the first certified welcoming city in Texas, Dallas has reduced barriers and created opportunities for immigrant residents by expanding language access across city services, supporting families by creating a resilience fund during the global pandemic, and offering legal services. Dallas's approach to divert people experiencing mental health crisis from jail or unnecessary hospitalization is quickly becoming a national model. It's called Right Care. With the right people, primarily a social worker, paramedic, and police officer, answering 911 calls, mental health patients are receiving the right treatment. Dallas's award-winning Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan, or CCAP, is constructing buildings that are energy efficient, installing solar, reducing emissions, converting the light-duty fleet to be electric, and using cleaner fuel for other vehicles, protecting water resources, and increasing access to healthy local foods from urban farms and gardens. We are an all-American city and a community for all.
We are One Dallas.
We are all one Dallas.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Amelia Casas. I am with the Texas Fair Defense Project. And today we will be speaking about the impact of fines and fees on communities of color and low-income communities around Texas. So thank you for joining. I am joined by my colleagues here. See if I can progress this. Yes. I'm joined by my colleagues, Emily Culp and Diana Klinger, Advocacy Fellows with our organization. Emily Culp is a nursing student turned political science major. With a passion for advocating, you will find no other filled with such boundless devotion and a continued dedication to learning. With a patient and persistent heart, she has lovingly cared for dementia residents in assisted living, volunteered at the VA, volunteered rehabilitating wildlife, as well as assisted emergency surgeries in the veterinary practice that she's worked at. Wearing many hats, one of her favorites is her position in the Texas Fair Defense Project's fellowship. When she is not studying, advocating, caring for others, you will find her taking care of her children, Sphinx kittens, or painting. She also has a passion for all genres of music. Please welcome Emily Culp. And next we have Diana Klinger. Diana Klinger loves working with people. She is a former educator teaching English and Spanish bilingual early childhood education and elementary through middle school. Diana is a mother to both human and fur babies, a wife. She enjoys being an advocate for green space and social justice. Diana was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and grew up on the border in Laredo, Texas. She experienced difficulties navigating the complicated driver's license renewal process and was met with significant barriers due to her naturalized citizenship status. She found TFTP after seeking legal help at the local library and now is proud to advocate for others so they don't have to experience the struggles that she's encountered. She encourages others to find the strength and voice within them. Diana loves spending time outdoors. She's an avid hiker, swimmer, and enjoys exploring state parks. So thank you all so much for joining us. We're going to have a really great conversation. And now I just want to touch a little bit more on who is Texas Fair Defense Project, why are we so focused on fines and fees, and so let's dig right in. The Texas Fair Defense Project is a nonprofit legal organization that fights to end the criminalization of poverty. We stand in this gap where a person does not have a recognized right to an attorney, and so we just ensure that a person's ability to pay does not determine whether they have meaningful access to counsel. And so you can see here our limited direct legal services that we provide to low-income Texans across the state. Record clearing, we help people petition for expunctions and non-disclosures when they're entitled to this relief. But also a large piece of our work, and actually how we got started and founded, was we help people who have had their licenses suspended due to unpaid court debt. We help them get their licenses back. It's a very complicated process, as y'all will learn about today. But we have been lucky to, mobilize our pro bono network and work with partners here on the ground in Dallas. We've had some different restoration clinics with the City Square. They're really great partners of ours. And so aside from our direct legal services, we also are unique in that we do a lot of advocacy for greater systemic change through impact litigation, as well as legislation. So why exactly do we advocate? We know that the criminal legal system disproportionately targets people based on race, income, and ability. Our clients often get caught in a cycle of poverty, debt, and criminal legal involvement, all because they just lack the financial resources to break that cycle. So the system is definitely working against folks, and so we try to make these reforms. And so today, here's just a quick outline of what our conversation today will entail. I will break down kind of a bit of the fines and fees that we really focus on here through Texas Fair Defense Project. And then I will also touch briefly within this section as well how the city of Dallas has made some, really big moves towards fine and fee justice. And then finally, our fellows will take it away for the second portion, driven by debt. They will really hone in on, the issues with this Omnibase program. And you're going to hear that a lot, but you will hopefully by the end of this be professionals in being able to, communicate and say, what is the Omnibase program and why isn't it quite working the way it should? And then we will head into a discussion portion. We'd love to hear all of your questions. And please feel free to add questions in the chat, but we will be holding them until the end if possible. So with that, let's get started. So now I'd just love for people to kind of reflect and, think about what do fines and fees, mean to you? What do you think of when you think of a fine? What do you think of when you think of a fee? How large are these numbers? How hard is it to take care of these? And today we'll be specifically talking about fines and fees that stem from Class C misdemeanors. So Class C misdemeanors, they fall under the jurisdiction of the Justice of the Peace and municipal courts. And they are also primarily traffic offenses, but not always. There are other offenses such as public intoxication, as well as the new statewide camping ban. So undesignated camping is also a Class C misdemeanor now. And these are non-jailable, fine-only offenses. However, they are still a criminal offense. And very importantly, folks who receive Class C misdemeanors are not entitled to a court-appointed attorney. And so, as I mentioned before, we often, fulfill this gap of, these legal services where folks are not entitled to an attorney. Moving on, so just to give kind of a visual of, what this cycle looks like. So if a person is unable to pay a ticket right away, the cost can snowball very, very quickly, turning into more tickets, fines, and fees. Missing a court date or a payment can lead to an arrest warrant. It can lead to a driver's license suspension or a driver's license hold under the failure to appear or failure to pay program, also known as Omnibase. And then that can even lead to jail time, even though originally the Class C misdemeanor had no tie to jail time. Just a couple of days in jail, we know, for failing to pay criminal debt can cause low-income people to lose their jobs, housing, and even their children. And so we see this happen quite frequently with our clients, and this is a pretty good visual of what can happen with a basic ticket. So if you can't pay and you're afraid to go to court because you may have a warrant, a $67 ticket for a defective taillight here in Dallas can very quickly become a lot more. And so even though the base fine is $67, there are automatic court costs that are tied to it. So already that ticket to even partially take care of it is over $200. And then for a lot of people, this is just an exorbitant amount of money. You cannot even, think of, paying this amount of money. And so, what if you try to save up? You may actually be paying a little later. Then you have a late penalty fee. But even before that, if you had missed, your first initial court date, you could have a failure to appear warrant and different warrants as well. And then the Omnibase license fee has just actually been reformed to be lower. It used to be $30, it is now $10, but these are still, fees that can just add up very, very quickly and be overwhelming for many, many folks. Here is a little bit of the work that the City of Dallas has been invited to participate in. In May 2020, the City of Dallas was selected as one of 10 jurisdictions across the country to participate in the inaugural Cities and Counties for Fine and Fee Justice cohort, facilitated by PolicyLink, the City of San Francisco's Financial Justice Project, and the Fines and Fees Justice Center. Each of these organizations are nationally recognized for their work in advancing racial and economic equity through research and advocacy. And so the city did a lot of work in trying to, determine what fines and fees are impacting communities and what can they do about it. So the city did a kind of community engagement, and they did this through a citywide survey. They had a total of 2,914 City of Dallas respondents, and they found that the top citations received were speeding, driver's license suspension, so very telling, animal pet related, and traffic violations. 60% of respondents were unaware that an alternative payment option was available. And so this is huge, right? Because if folks don't know that there's any alternative to paying, it's scary. They are unable to pay this fine and fee, and then what? And then 45% respondents were unable to pay based on their financial hardships. And that is very understanding. And then nearly 87% of respondents who lost their licenses identified as Black or Latina. So we know that there is a huge racial disparity of who is getting their licenses revoked or suspended or what be it. And then very importantly, I thought it was interesting that 8 out of the top 10 zip codes for citations across the city were issued below I-30. And I think this is very important because historically, the city of Dallas had more affluent districts and areas above I-30 and lower income below I-30. So also very telling to who is really being hit and targeted by these fines and fees. And so the City of Dallas put forward these recommendations based off of the findings. And so what you have here is improving notification and community communications processing. So these are the court forms that people receive when they have a fine or fee, or even to let people know that, hey, you have an upcoming court date, or you have to still fulfill this. These are just things that can use improvement. And then discontinuing participation in the Omnibase program. We will shortly touch a little bit more on the Omnibase program, but it is a very harmful program. And alongside with the scofflaw program, it really just hinders people's ability to drive. And so canceling participation in these programs has the potential to alleviate the burden of holds on over 72,000 residents across the entire city. And so we are continuing to work with the City of Dallas to make sure that these residents do get the relief that they are able to. And it's all a part of the work. And so now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our amazing fellows so they can tell us a little bit more about the Omnibase program, and they'll touch on a report that we have drafted together to really show, the failures of the program. And so y'all can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, so when you talk about living without a license, it's really easy to say that out loud, but I don't think that anyone could actually even realize, and I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words. You're not going to truly understand what life without a license is until you lose that license and try to recoup that license. It will affect every part of your life. It can take away, you lose jobs, homes, opportunities. It will inadvertently put you in a place of loss where you become solely dependent on others. And this is why I believe that Omnibase in itself has promoted living without licenses for many, many residents, not only in Dallas, but all around Texas, by just setting up more walls and barriers, which is why in itself, it is a fractured system because of the damage that it causes. It's inherently set up for people to fail, for people that are struggling, communities of color, communities of low socioeconomic status. These are the people that are hit the hardest and the ones that are least able to regain that license without having to jump through tremendous hurdles. Emily, did you want to add anything on that?
No, I mean, you covered everything pretty well.
Okay, so then moving on to our next slide. I believe this one is yours.
Emily, you're muted. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I did not realize it was muted. Under the Omnibase program, jurisdictions can contract with a third-party vendor, the Omnibase Services of Texas, to put holds on people's license if they miss a court date or miss a payment for a Class C misdemeanor. Most courts do not lift the holds until the traffic tickets generally, at least that's for me, and fees are paid off entirely. Some people are put on a payment plan that lasts for years, and during that time, they cannot obtain a license. I was not offered a payment plan. I did ask. Many people must continue to drive to provide for themselves and their families, and therefore risk getting more tickets for driving without a valid license. And I can tell you that's absolutely true. I did continue to drive when my license was suspended because there's no other way for me to get to work to try to make the money to give it to them. However, I continued getting tickets for not having a license, and it just snowballed. Each of these tickets then triggers a new license hold under the Omnibase program, trapping them in a never-ending cycle of debt. So every single ticket that I would get, whether it's not putting my blinker on or not stopping enough, that each one is a completely separate hold. So how many Omnibase holds do y'all think that there are in Dallas? Just Dallas, not all of Texas, in 2020? You'll be surprised to find out over 200,000 just in Dallas. Stop it, honey.
Now, of those 200,000, which we were talking about just in Dallas, like Emily said, there can be multiple holds. So you could have 3 or 4 holds through the Omnibase program just on one individual. And so you can imagine the multiplication of the fees. A little bit about my own experience, since we're going a little bit deeper into the Omnibase, would be that they were impossible to get a hold of. Right there with the IRS. You can be on there at 7 o'clock in the morning, like 7:59, dialing, trying to figure out what can I do. And this was, of course, after going in and trying to renew a driver's license and then getting arrested for a ticket that I didn't know that I still had fines for. And then, of course, having to get out of jail. And by then you have more fines accumulated, not to mention the horror of going to jail. It's although it's a humbling experience, it puts you down emotionally, it puts you down physically. It's very breaking, most especially because, yes, you will own the fact that you did something wrong at one point, but the penalties that come with it just keep on snowballing and accruing to where people are stuck in that cycle of debt, of ever increasing debt, because the more time goes by, the more you will owe, the more fines will be added, and so forth. So that's just to give a little perspective. And next we're going to go into, so I think it's the slide after this one. Let's see. Okay. The Omnibase program fails to increase core compliance and core revenue. These are like the top 5 fails. People who don't have money to pay fines and costs will not be able to pay later. It's like that pay now, pay later mentality. If you have the money, you aren't going to wait. And so right there, that disparity between people who can afford the fine and people who can't, it's just ever so apparent. That's like highlighted right there. And like Emily referred to, many people aren't told that there are alternatives. You have to seek that out. But picture someone who is already in a very desperate state where they're losing their license, they're losing their livelihood, losing their vehicles. All they hear are fines, fines, fines. And then, you're afraid. And I speak from personal experience. I was always afraid to reach out. Like, what are they going to tell me now? Am I going to call and they're going to come arrest me? I found out later the different things that, like, no, they're not just going to like jump in a car and arrest you. But at the same time, I had already like willfully walked in to go renew a driver's license and gotten arrested in front of my husband, who also got arrested in front of my teenage daughter, who ended up having to cry for her grandmother to come pick up the car that was outside the DMV. It was just humiliating. And I know that I am not alone. It's not that you don't want to adhere to the laws and own what you did and have some kind of retribution toward the county, toward the state. But at the same time, it's not attainable. It's not possible for many people. People are burned with the license renewal holds. Like we've mentioned over and over, you need to drive to work to pay that fine. But if you can't drive to work, okay, then what am I going to do? I'll take the bus. Okay. So if there's good transit system, which I understand that there is in many places, that is still going to cost you money. It's going to cost you time, because it's not like jumping in a car and trying to get to work as quickly as possible. You have to plan for it. And in many times, I know it from people that I've spoken to, it takes them 2 hours to get to work, 2 hours to get home. It puts them in unsafe situations. I myself have actually had a very bad incident. Fortunately, I'm okay. But there are people that many terrible things happen that are much worse than a Class C misdemeanor just happened to them, because they put themselves in a situation where they need to try and make a living. They lead to warrants and jail time, which multiply your fees. They don't work as an incentive. Telling me that I'm going to get more fees that I'm already drowning in. Do you really think that's going to make it any better? The times that I called that I was able to get through, or I was lucky enough to get a call back, if I was able to leave a message in that queue, your options, they never really discussed options. It was like, well, you have to pay this, this, or this. And these are the amounts that you can do. And when you can't do it, where do you go? What do? There is no excuse for maybe that initial traffic ticket. I get it. But then what is the benefit of imposing these harsh fines that are just going to multiply and make things worse? And we just go back to number 5. Most payments occur before any enforcement tool is used. People that can pay are going to pay before they get that letter in the mail threatening that they're going to come to arrest them, or their family gets a letter in the mail. I mean, there's nothing worse than that. And never has it been more apparent than with this whole, coming off of the tail end of COVID. Everything got put on hold. And so you can only imagine the desperation of so many people. I hope that was clear enough. If anybody has a question, certainly we're happy to stop at any time and continue. And so moving on.
All right. When people can't pay or don't appear, it's not as simple as somebody just doesn't want to pay their ticket, or I'd rather spend my money on something else. That's not the case. At least it's not for me, and I can almost assure for the majority of Texans. It's not that we just don't want to pay it. Not having the ability can cause arrest and jail time. Like Diana said, she actually was trying to renew her license and got arrested at the DMV, trying to do the right thing. COVID concerns, job loss. I actually don't have a job. I lost my job because I don't have a way to get there, because I continued driving for a little while without a license, continued to get more tickets. So I just was drowning and I lost my job, which without the ability to pay for things that your kids need, you can lose your children for that. You can lose your home. Obviously, you can lose your car, which I did too. This is all from traffic tickets. And I was taking my son to church every Wednesday and Sunday. I can't even take my son to church anymore because we would try to take the route where we didn't think there'd be any police officers. And my son would see one and he would just have so much anxiety. And I'm just trying to take him to church. I mean, I do not feel personally that the punishment fits the crime. I also have to use Instacart because I don't have a way to get to the grocery store, and that's some more fees, or well, not fees, but service charges for that. That's not free. So it's just, you just drown without a way to get out.
And so to piggyback on what Emily said, and just to speaking from my own experience, which is why I'm so blessed that the Texas Fair Defense Project was able to give me this opportunity to speak, is that I come from my father was a surgeon. He gave me a good education. Life happens, things happen, and losing my license was probably one of the worst things that could have happened, because that literally snowballed to a point where at one point my husband and I were living out of our cars. And then we lost the cars. And of course, you can't get a car back when you don't have a license. It just goes on and on. And probably for the first time in our late 40s, we found ourselves having to rely, on community resources. And I'm a former educator, so that was a really hard blow. And then finally, one day I was just desperate. And I thought, what can I do? I went into the law library And there was this very kind lady who probably saw me shattered and broken and referred me to Texas Fair Defense. I'm very happy to say that today my husband has his license. I still don't have mine because, once again, when we became homeless, I misplaced my certificate of naturalization. I got every document I could, and I even got USCIS. And I'm talking, this was a span of like 2 years, y'all, where I'm collecting everything I can to finally walk in after making that online appointment, waiting 3 months with everything I own: voter's registration, security, social security statements, expired passport, expired license. And they're like, well, I'm sorry. You need to prove to us now that you're a U.S. citizen. Mind you, I am 53. I came to this country the right way with my parents. We paid our dues. I've been a citizen all my life. Well, I consider myself a citizen. I believe it was in 1985. And so now, okay, let me see what USCIS can do. Well, USCIS sent me papers that they wouldn't take, not even if I had them apostilled. They want an original certificate, which is 9 months and $500, which, how am I going to make that money when I'm still struggling to just put my life back together? Fortunately, I'm a fighter. But I know that there's been so many times where I am so broken and just so done and so over it. I'm grateful that I have, my faith, my family who keeps pushing. And I guess I'm just, I've been blessed, but I could definitely see how this could break someone. It really could. I'm lucky to have the position that I have today, simply because I had tremendous references. I had once worked for an agency like this, which somehow that paperwork carried over. So I'm back after COVID at 53, fully employed, and trying to get my life back together. But I was talking to my partners here about how odd it was the other day when I was thinking, they made me feel this big when I went in to go get my driver's license. And had I had the ability not to have to pay those fines through Omnibase, this would never have happened. Yes, the punishment does not fit the crime. And if you picture someone like me who taught generations of children to speak in 2 languages, who has always had a job, who has volunteered and worked and done everything she could to just be a good citizen, being told all of a sudden, well, you're not a citizen to us. Now you're going to have to prove it, and you're not going to get your license. Over and over. And then picture someone like me, picture times 70,000 in your area, in the Dallas area. Someone like Emily times 70,000. We tend to think like not put faces, which is why I'm so glad that we were able to be here today, so that you can put a face to the struggle, to the people that are struggling, because it's me, it's Emily, and it's many people like us. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Anna, that was beautiful. And I hope that, people do, realize how much of an impact that this program, as well as others, have on us and our communities. And I do want to quickly just kind of follow up on, specifically how you mentioned the 70,000 in the Dallas area who are susceptible, to the Omnibase program right now. A quick update as to where the city of Dallas is now with fine and fee justice. On September 22nd, the city council voted to discontinue the Omnibase and scofflaw programs as part of their annual budget. We are, of course, so grateful that the city council has made this bold decision. However, there is still work to do through the implementation process. So today, I just really encourage everyone in the audience. I will be sure to get to your questions right now, but to call or email your city council person and to ask them to ensure that all Omnibase and scofflaw holds are lifted and quickly, so that all of our folks can get back on the road and so we can get back on our feet. Omnibase is, still widely used in other parts of Texas as well. So if you're tuning in from somewhere else, I still encourage you to urge your city council to look at their contracts, if they do have one with Omnibase, to really push them to cancel it. And let's help Texans get back on the road. So for now, are you two okay with taking some questions from our audience? I feel like we have quite a few. Great. Okay, so just starting with the first one, how much does the 500 represent in the average monthly income? Not sure I completely understand.
Well, I mean, if I could chime in, here in Travis County, because we are in the Austin area, and I know that the Dallas area life is pretty expensive. The average paycheck after taxes and deductions for, say, a session worker, which I failed to mention that for a while I was doing staffing, just, to see if staffing companies would pick us up without having our driver's licenses. My average paycheck take home for a week would be anywhere between $299 to $320. So that would be 2 paychecks to pay 1 fine. And that's without eating or it's very undoable. If it isn't for 2 grown-ups in their 50s, you can imagine a young person just trying to make it on their own, starting life, or family people when they're like the sole providers. How can you pay that?
Well, I'm a full-time college student, and as I explained, I don't have a way to get to work. $500 is 99% of what I have. I get $523 a month in child support, and that's what I get to spread between 2 children and myself. And so 500 would be pretty much everything.
Yes, and that does go for the majority of our clients, definitely. What are some of the ways that philanthropists can address restorative or preventative justice, like facilitating replacements for taillights before a ticket happens in the first place?
Oh, I think that's a great, just that. I mean, if there was definitely, I don't know who posed that question, but good thought, good job. I mean, create different nonprofit agencies, I guess, in different counties that people could go to and apply for those services.
I also know that there's a huge movement and growth for mutual aid organizations, and so I definitely see that as a possibility. If direct cash assistance is also great. I think those are definitely some policies and things we could get behind. And another anonymous user asked, why are courts not doing a better job of letting people know about alternative payment programs earlier in the process?
Or at all? That's a great question. That is a great question.
I was able to get community service for one of my tickets, and that was a battle. That was a big struggle. I had to have 3 different appearances. One was to have a whole nother time in front of the judge just to ask him for permission to have community service. It was very difficult. When I initially called, they actually told me they don't offer that. And I said, I'm trying to handle this. I don't have financial means to pay for it. So could I do community service? And they initially told me no. So I did some research and found out that it's supposed to be an option. So I called them back and told them that. And then they made me come up there and discuss it with the office worker. And it was very difficult just to get community service instead of the money.
Mm-hmm. I share in that experience. It took tons of phone calls. I wanted to know what I could do to help our cases through the Texas Fair Defense, who had so graciously agreed to take Richard and I tried doing everything that I could to help. And of course I had time because of COVID. So I was home those days when I was just calling the courts. And I almost feel like that at one point they're like, just give it to her, like let her do this so that, or let them do this so that they'll get off our backs. But it took several calls. first to get recognized, and then for them to recognize that, yes, well, this is an option. We're going to go ahead and do this. But that in itself, is a process. It's reaching out. It's being heard. It's finally coming to an agreement, following through. And then once that is done, making sure that those fines are removed. I mean, it doesn't just end at that. Like, okay, just it's a struggle. And for especially people of low means, and when you're already frightened, I was always frightened. So I it's hard to make that call. It really is.
Thank you both. Yes, definitely. 100%. It's hard. It's hard to navigate. And especially what we run into and some of our attorneys run into is that the clerks don't actually know that information. And so they would possibly tell you if they knew, but sometimes they just don't know. So definitely a big need for more education. And then are there other programs across the country that actually do increase compliance? So I'm actually going to drop a link to our report in the chat. I hope that you all can see it. And part of this report actually includes what our recommendations would be. One of them being obviously fixing these court forms, but also expanding waivers, expanding opportunities for community supervision or payment plans, having payment plans that don't have to immediately take a big chunk of money from you. These are all, really get compliance rates up, because if people see a light at the end of the tunnel, that is what they need. And so please, if you are interested and have time, please do read our report. There's some really great information in there. Let's see here. Some really great comments, personally and professionally relate to all of this. The system seems designed for us to fail. Have you considered tackling the NTTA fine fee as well, since they now can impact families renewing registration holds? Yes, so that is definitely on our radar. Along with scofflaw, they're very, very similar. So we're hoping to do some more around that as well. Are there any other questions? Or I guess I can provide you all with a question before we wrap up. What do you hope comes from today's conversation?
Are you asking me and Diana?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I just, for one, would like more people to know about what's going on, because so many people just have no clue. I believe there's a large misconception that we just are irresponsible and don't want to pay it. A lot of times, until you're in that situation, you don't understand it, like Diana said earlier. So just more people knowing about it, and also people making sure that they do get an ability to pay hearing, because that is supposed to happen. And I have never once been offered that, nor did I even know that it was a right of mine. And I come to think of it, I don't know anybody who's ever had one of those. So that would be a great thing too.
And piggybacking off Emily, definitely for a higher awareness of how disproportionate the fines are directly impacting the communities of color and communities of lower income. It's just there's no way to. We have to be better as citizens, better as communities as a whole, better as cities, and better at helping people actually succeed, not setting up those roadblocks. So if I was to walk away with one thing, is to make sure that anyone that's here, anyone that's listening, just spread the word. If you spread the word that the help is out there, advocate for people not to stop, to push, to keep pushing, to ask questions, not to be afraid. And if if you can't donate to, causes that will help other people with this, because I know that there are, some churches that'll try and help, then all you have to do is give of your time and get the word out.
I completely agree. And yes, please do reach out to our organization if if there's a particular jurisdiction that you are interested in getting rid of the Omnibase program. We will definitely be continuing to do statewide legislation and advocacy to try to reform it to be less harmful, and hopefully one day get a full repeal. But if there are no other questions, Emily or Diana, I don't know if you have any last words that you'd like to share before we end.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much. And I guess we'll see y'all later.